What are your thoughts on the current United States public school system? Elementary school I think is pretty good, though perhaps more support for teachers. Burnout should be taken seriously. I remember in elementary school, kids who were not at reading level were automatically separated and put into separate classes. And the testing for it was done super early in the year. More should be done to integrate students at different levels, so that no one has to feel left out or different. In general, we could use serious reform in how students with different learning needs are treated. Middle school in general can do more to make students feel like they belong and to inspire and encourage them. Middle school is a tough time for a lot of kids. Schools need to address not just academic needs, but social ones as well. High schools need to do more to prepare students for careers and adult life. In general, schools expect everyone to learn and function in the same way, which is of course flawed. It would be nice to incorporate different kinds of learning, including more hands-on learning and internships. No students should have to deal with not having enough funding for books or well-maintained facilities, especially when a school down the block in a different district has substantially more resources. Despite the fact that I'm not a Christian, I send my daughter to a private Lutheran school. We tried public school, but her kindergarten teacher was shocked that my child knew her alphabet and that she could actually read some words. She was miles ahead of what the teacher was teaching. At Christmas break, we decided to look into other options. At her school now, she has smaller class sizes and the faculty actually have the time and resources to teach in a more beneficial way. The religious stuff isn't my favorite, but my daughter is doing well. She starts 3rd grade in the fall. The state of the Denver public school system is abysmal, in my opinion. Teachers can only do so much with what they have to work with, and kids slip through the cracks. When she's old enough for middle school, I plan to enroll her in the American Indian Academy, but for now we'll stick with the Lutherans, even if it's costing me more than I can really afford. Thankfully, her dad and stepmom split the cost and we are pretty good at co-parenting. Sadly, co-schools aren't going to get better until Tabor disappears. Too much of the focus in schools is about memorization and no thinking. We still very much focus our education to prepare people for a 1950s style assembly line job. We need to teach kids how to think, how to research, how to vet sources, and how to analyze information, rather than just taking things at face value. I also think that some subjects such as history could be sped up by teaching overall concepts for the semester and then interspersing it with 1-hour documentaries that already exist. Think of a documentary on ancient Egypt you most likely have seen on TV. Showing that to a class would teach them enough about ancient Egypt, and if they need details they can always research. What is important is to teach how ancient Egypt fit into the larger world stage at the time, and how it influenced history over what dates some pharaoh ruled for. If we sped up some subjects like history, so kids would only have to take 1 or 2 semesters of it, that would free up time for other more valuable classes such as modern finance, budgets, taxes, etc. The major flaw is that they are mainly funded by the surrounding community's property taxes. This makes poorer areas have worse schools, which only perpetuates the problem. Schools should be funded evenly through a group fund either by state or federally or both in part. And once someone from those schools makes it, they move away, so it's not helping that community and just perpetuates the cycle. I ain't having my taxes go to that goddamn school for Mexicans. I realize that realistically it does not work this way, but I have adjusted my mindset to think of it as the taxes I pay are me paying back into the system for the education I received, and have nothing to do with how many kids other people have, or what country those kids came from. I hate to break it to you, but one of the driving forces behind successful public schools isn't money, but rather parent involvement. Look at the Asian community in New York City. They are some of the poorest people in the city, but their kids are extremely successful academically. We say that we want better schools, but many of us are too selfish to want to pay the taxes necessary to do that. Standardized testing is dumb, and it teaches to a test instead of giving students the knowledge they need, rather than training children to go to college or get a job. I think we should instead focus on making them well-rounded, knowledgeable people with some basic life skills, balancing a checkbook, setting a budget, etc. Disagree with the third one. The only reason school is mandatory is for getting a job. School, college, job. If you want to do a trade or other, there should be a class for that too. You can learn the last one on your own. Hopefully 12 years of English education can be applied to reading a book. I don't disagree, but I think we do a big disservice to students by thinking of school solely as a vehicle for job training, especially in the pre-college level. School should teach students what they need to know beyond simple job skills. Children are not learning how to think. They are learning most information for the moment. Also, kids die there, so I don't have a high opinion. The only reason my kids are in school is because they wanted to try high school after being homeschooled for a few years. Homeschooling should be illegal. There are some cases, however. I was bullied badly. I had thick skin, but never fought back, because zero tolerance meant I would get in worse trouble for the reaction the school did jack squat about bullying. I wanted to do homeschooling to escape the bullying, but I couldn't carry through, because apparently it was not allowed in my district. Why? Certainly as a PhD chemist I'm more qualified to teach any kids I'd have than any teacher, and for subjects I'm not as well versed in, say reading writing non-scientifically, I could hire someone, an author, certainly more qualified than an English teacher. No? Pedagogy and educational research has gotten more robust, and there's a greater awareness of all the factors that affect students outside of school, such as poverty, inequities, and a lack of student voice in the school. But systematically, all our schools are set up to fail some arbitrary standardized tests, so that some consultants can swoop in and save us. Instead of focusing on making education more relevant to our kids in their lives, we are instead pressured to make sure all our kids are ready for some big test and know how to read the weirdly worded test questions and game the system. And no matter how well a school does one year, the next year they'll raise the standard until eventually every school fails and the consulting firms get all these clients to try out their programs that, yet again, ignore what our students need. There's too much money involved, and I find it hard to trust that some company has our kids' best interests in mind. I'm not really very educated on exactly how the public school system works, but as a kid who did public, private, homeschooling, and early college, I can say that I liked homeschooling the best. Didn't have the best time in the public system due to the whole teach everyone the same way mentality, and ended up having my parents basically teach me the things that the system couldn't figure out how to explain to me. So, TBH, I think the system needs to realize that standardized tests are really only as good as your ability to take tests, and why students get a panic attack just by thinking about them. I have a buddy who was homeschooled up until 4th grade, and just being homeschooled up until that age let him skip a grade. Has a year younger than me, and he was always incredibly intelligent and good at math science all through high school and even into college. It's insane how only a few formative years can really set people up. Not American. Never went to American schooling. But I have friends in America. Some of America's schools have atrociously early start times. How do they expect kids to function? Also, your grading systems can be easily rigged depending if a teacher likes you or not. I hear about it very frequently, and some teachers don't get punished like they should. Also, not enough breaks. I don't know about all schools, but one of my friends has a 30-minute lunch time tops. How is that any time to have a good lunch and be able to socialize enough, as well as recharge from growing classes? Our school has 30-minute lunches, which is the only break the entire day, unless you count study halls, but you're likely to be doing work in those anyway. The early hours make even less sense for high schoolers. Teenagers are physiologically harmed by keeping that schedule. Too much variance in quality between different states and towns. Some are great, others might actually be doing more harm than good. Yup, varies wildly depending on location. North Carolina public schools are top-notch other than CMS I guess, but the teachers are very underpaid, and the schools themselves severely lack decent infrastructure. South Carolina schools are probably the worst in the nation. Is Gaston County part of CMS? They didn't seem to be too great either from what I heard, unless it was Gaston Day. No, CMS stands for Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, so only Mecklenburg County. Are you sure? I go to public school in North Carolina and my school has a deal so kids sell pills and bring bottles of alcohol to school and no one does anything. I think subjects such as geography, finance, and home ec should be focused on more. I can only speak for California however, since each state is different. Though this may be due to my college educated bias, I think there needs to a greater focus on civics in our schools. The misunderstandings regarding governmental functions and our civic duties and privileges is astounding. If people actually knew what their taxes were funding, and had a glimpse at how things are done by elected officials and government administrators especially at the local level, I think people would be more willing to be involved with their communities. You have to think of who you're trying to teach here. High schoolers. What do you remember from your high school history class? Exactly. It's like real estate location, location, location. My daughter will be a junior this fall at our local public high school. She's an honor student and involved in a couple of clubs activities. She's made good friends. She likes most of her teachers. We think she's getting a pretty good education, all things considered. The freshmen and sophomores take the SAT every year for practice, and her scores were good. So, we're pretty happy with our local schools. Now, my hometown. The public schools were and are atrocious. High school English and math proficiency scores in the single digits. Like, 6th percentile in the nation. My parents sent us to Catholic schools all the way through high school. As a straight A student going to 8th grade, I found Common Core testing to be frustrating. Like SBAC. Luckily, I got both 4s above average on my math and language arts back tests. SBAC is meant to make you fail. Also it's poorly designed also. I think some schools are underfunded. I live in Los Angeles, which is known for their large population. I'm just lucky that my school has enough money to afford computers for the school to use. There's too many kids in one classroom. Sometimes, there could be 40 plus kids in a classroom. That may seem unusual for those not in California, but it's kinda normal to me.